Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show, Week 17 Rankings Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to get those fantasy lineups right with the ranks you need ahead of what should be hopefully a good championship week for you all. So appreciate you tuning in. As always, we are recording this on Tuesday. Again, not doing our usual mid-Thursday rankings episode. Obviously, got some holidays that we want to be celebrating with our families. But accordingly, Freedman, we can say today, Happy Festivus.
Yes, happy Festivus to the rest of us. I mean, I don't know how into Seinfeld people are anymore. Like, I have to acknowledge, like, much to my chagrin, it's a show that existed like 20 years ago in the cultural zeitgeist. But man, still a great show. And Festivus, like, as a quote unquote like real life holiday, like one of the writers of the show, his dad actually invented Festivus, and they imported that into Seinfeld. But it's just weird to think that there actually was a real life human who was like, you know what, I'm going to create Festivus. The airing of grievances, the feats of strength, the Festivus poll, just a fantastic all around holiday.
Absolutely legendary stuff. And I cannot echo that enough, Freeman. If you guys are out there a little bit, younger and stuff, that's fine. You can't control that. But what you can't control is watching freaking Seinfeld and being educated about one of the best shows in cinematic history. But again, guys, this is a fantasy football show after all. So with all that said, let's get into our Week 17 rankings, starting off with our top 24 running backs. And by our top 24 running backs, I actually mean my top 24 running backs, but Freeman's ranks are also live on fantasylife.com, and he'll continue to interject throughout the show with where he sees some differences. But yeah, guys, got a top 12 on the screen right now. Christian McCaffrey, the RB1, followed by Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Saquon Barkley starting to get hot at the right time, rounding out the top 6. RB7, we got Chase Brown, followed by Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Kyren Williams, and yes, rookie RJ Harvey cracking the top 12 with the fantasy season on the line. RB13, we got Travion Henderson. For now, we'll get to some injuries in a little bit, but he is in the concussion protocol. Honestly, probably would just be slotting Ramondre Stevenson in right there if he is out. Ashton Genty, coming off his big week 16, is slotting in as the RB14, followed by Bucky Irving, Omar and Hampton without Kamani Vidal. Josh Jacobs on a bit of a pitch count, unfortunately, at the moment. DeAndre Swift, RB18. Javonte Williams, RB19, playing it through a little bit of pain on his own. Kenneth Walker, RB20, followed by Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, Breece Hall, and Blake Corum. Freeman, if I had to ask you to draw a circle of trust in terms of guys who are just absolute must-start players, would it even be on this page, or are we just doing that after the top 12?
I will say Ashton Genty is increasingly intriguing because he has still had great utilization. And then last week, we finally did get some proof of concept of him doing well against a really good Texans defense. And then now he has a matchup against the worst run defense in the league going against the Giants. So I think I would put Ashton Genty in the circle of trust, but I would definitely not put Bucky Irving in it. So I'm drawing the line right there, number 14, Ashton Genty.
And if you wanted to bump up Hampton one spot without Vidal, I could understand it. But then again, usage-based, yes, he is in the circle of trust, but just a very tough matchup coming up against the Houston Texans, or at least it should be. Ashton Genty certainly didn't have any problems there in week 16. But Freeman, before we get into, again, some of the best and worst matchups, and then also our what the heck flex bowl calls, did want to go through a litany of injuries to be worrying about. So again, we are recording this Tuesday afternoon. I know things are going to change, but just want to try to give you guys the if-thens, in terms of what we know now. Starting off with, again, a recognition that Javonte Williams is playing through a bit of a neck stinger issue. We did see Malik Davis a little bit more involved. Now, the Cowboys are implied for the third most points of the week against the Commanders, so still imagine Javonte should be in fantasy lineups of most shapes and sizes, but last week was his first game that he finished outside the top 26 RBs all season long. More of, again, a mid-tier RB2 as opposed to a consensus top 12. Freeman with Packers running back Josh Jacobs. We actually did hear from Matt LaFleur on Monday. That Jacobs' lack of usage down the stretch was mostly because of Emmanuel Wilson running well, and he did confirm that Jacobs didn't further injure his knee. So hopefully he will be out there. But again, man, I got him ranked RB17 because I do think even if Jacobs is active, we're going to see more Emmanuel Wilson than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm increasingly skeptical that we actually do see Josh Jacobs. I have him ranked as RB22. So that's kind of me trying to hedge against like this. All right, one, I don't think that he's going to play. And then two, if he does play, I don't know if he's going to have a significantly greater workload than what he had previously. And then three, he has a really tough matchup anyway, going against a Ravens defense that has been one of the best units against the run since their bye week. And then four, the quarterback position is really uncertain. So you put it all together and it's like, I'm having him as an RB2 at best.
I am with you there. Meanwhile, I mentioned Patriots RB Travion Henderson, RB 13. Again, if he's going to be out of the picture, I do think Ramondre Stevenson, whether you want to rank him RB 13, 14, 15, he is someone that, again, is going to be in far more fantasy lineups and not ahead of that good smash spot against the Jets. Also got Woody Marks dealing with his own ankle injury, guys. It will be Jahar Jordan. If not, talk with Dwayne McFarland about this on the utilization report show. But again, Jordan, not someone that's going to be jumping up into our top 16 or anything like that, but does enter that kind of RB 25 to 30 flex territory where you can feel good if Woody Marks is indeed out of the picture. We will see what happens with Alvin Kamara and this knee injury. Honestly, he would be someone where, yeah, we're starting to kind of look at him as a borderline RB2, a reasonable enough matchup there against the Titans this week. But more than anything, Freedman, like if Kamara is back, I'm not rushing to shove him into my lineups. I think he's probably fine enough to start, but that would be the downgrade for Taysom Hill, who we'll be talking about later.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm just still skeptical. I'm skeptical that we see Alvin Kamara. And if he plays, I'm skeptical that they actually give him the full workload. I mean, without Kamara, things have actually still been running pretty well within that offense. Bringing back a guy who's, what is he, 30, 31, at the end of the season after he hasn't played for a long time and just loading him up, that just seems like something that is unlikely.
And guys, again, without Kamara, we're not really trying to get Audric Estime into many, if any, lineups. Okay, he's Freedman's RB 36. He's my RB 40. We do have guys like Dave Montgomery, Zach Charbonnet, Isaiah Pacheco, Emmanuel Wilson, Chris Rodriguez, among others, ranked ahead of Estime. Also note that Browns running back Dylan Sampson dealing with a hand injury with Quinshon Judkins out of the picture. It could mean that Rocket Sanders gets most of the backfield to himself, but we also got Travion Williams there, and it's also against the Steelers defense that just shut down the Lions run game. So not exactly expecting big things out of the Browns, regardless of who is their starter. But yeah, Rocket Sanders, if you are desperate, would be the man to get there. Mentioned Kamani Vidal being potentially out with the neck issue. That's good news for Amarian Hampton. And then also for Mr. Aaron Jones, if we do in fact see Jordan Mason sideline with the ankle injury, that does make Jones more of a low end, kind of borderline RB2, as opposed to his current standing as I think the RB28 in our consensus ranks. But also need to keep an eye on JJ McCarthy, because if we do not have him, actually would be, downgrading further with the Max Brosmer experience. So again, keep an eye on the injuries throughout the rest of the week. But yeah, with that in mind, Freeman, let's get into the best matchup of the week, and that is going to go to Cardinals RB1, Michael Carter, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense that, per our DVP tool that you can find over fantasylife.com, yields a plus 5.9 Xfinity boost to opposing running backs. Again, that is the worst mark in the league, at least among run defenses, but it's the best for Michael Carter, Freeman. So we saw Mario Mercado a little bit more involved last week, which made sense. He wasn't on the injury report. It was a second game back from injury, but still, Michael Carter is someone who I'm assuming you're projecting for 15 plus touches, and that can go a long way against Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that has the highest total on the slate. We have seen with Jacoby Brissett as quarterback that the offense for the Cardinals can stay on target. And then the matchup, of course, is great going against a really bad, kind of like historically bad Bengals defense. And then the Bengals offense is good enough to kind of push the ball, keep the pace, so that the Cardinals continue to have to push the pace on offense. So I think we're going to see points all over the place, which means that I think Michael Carter, I mean, the last man standing, like we wouldn't have expected in week 1 that in week 17, we would be talking about Michael Carter as like, hey, the RB2 that you want to put in your lineup, but he can certainly slot in there as your low end RB2 as a flex and probably hold his own given the matchup.
And he is one of those guys where, when I put my rankings together, everyone, it's Monday morning and stuff. And then throughout the week, as I go through my own start sit decisions or just dive into more research, I'll obviously update things. And despite having Michael Carter Moore as like an RB29 to start the week, I do want to start him over guys like Breece Hall and Rico Dowdle in tough matchups at this point. So again, very good stuff going on there for Carter. Honorable mention, good matchups though. As Freedman said earlier, Ashton Genty gets the New York Giants. Now, it would be very fantasy football for Genty to bust in a great matchup right after he made the most out of a very bad matchup against the Texans, but still, as we saw, still has that one hitter, quitter, home run ability to hopefully, at least turn a couple touches into some fantasy points. And then also Chase Brown against the Cardinals obviously helped a lot of you get to week 17 in the first place, a plus 4.4 Xfinity boost there. Both those guys, Freeman, should be in, again, far more fantasy lineups than not.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Chase Brown, he's just been dominant since Joe Burrow returned. You have the Bengals, who are implied for the most points this week out of any team. They're home favorites. It just feels like another Chase Brown type of game where he just absolutely goes off against a Cardinals run defense that is one of the worst in the league, missing Josh Sweat on the defensive line, likely missing Walter Nolan on the defensive line, and then also missing maybe 3 starters in the secondary. So just a unit that top to bottom is just decimated and already bad. So great opportunities for Chase Brown. And then Ashton Genty, mentioned him before, and it would be the most Ashton Genty thing. Imagine being the one guy in the world who drafted Ashton Genty, somehow survived that. I didn't start him last week. Ashton Genty goes off. You still make it to the championship game. You start Ashton Genty this week against the worst run defense in the league, and then he does nothing. Imagine being that guy. There's one person in the world that is going to happen to this week. I will just say, at least it's not me.
I cannot wait till we clip that right after Ashton Genty has 60 scoreless yards here this Sunday. Hey, knock on wood. I hope I'm wrong, guys. Hopefully Genty wins you guys your title, but it just seems way too likely to go down. So again, with Chase Brown, this Bengals offense, though, guys, they literally are implied for the most points of the week. So I know it's been a little bit of a, up and down season there for everyone involved in Cincy, but right now, again, based on all those injuries with the Cardinals and Joe Burrow and company looking good, really can be treating the Bengals as an offense that we thought we were getting from week 1 on. That said, guys, let's turn those smiles upside down again. The worst matchups of the week. Welcome to our Vanna Cream Trust Meter, talking about just how much we do happen to trust Jets RB Breece Hall against the Patriots. Now, Freeman, we've been talking for about 11 minutes, and I have already moved Breece Hall down my ranks before we actually even got to this section. So certainly not looking good, and it's a Patriots defense that has been had a little bit more on the ground here recently, but still on the season a minus 3.4 Xfinity boost against RBs. That is a bottom 3 mark on the season. So, hey, we just saw with Ashton Genty, just because you had 2 or 3 straight bad games doesn't mean good running backs can't, pop for a big one here and there. But just, man, James Cook and Derrick Henry having big games, a little bit different from Breece Hall, Freeman, when, again, we do have to continue to deal with the Brady Cook situation under center.
The only person who is thinking about starting Breece Hall right now is the guy who drafted Breece Hall and continued to start him all the way to the consolation bracket. And now he needs to decide if he is starting Breece Hall in the matchup that will determine whether he has to get a tattoo. Like that is the person who is thinking about starting Breece Hall right now. And I will say, don't do it, right? Like he's gotten you to this point, which is the worst possible point that you could be in. You shouldn't have drafted Breece Hall. You shouldn't have started Breece Hall weeks 1 through 16. Do not start him week 17.
We've gotten to the point where Breece Hall is retweeting a LeBron James tweet from February of 2023, literally just saying, maybe it's me. So yeah, vibes not exactly going great for the Jets, and that does include Breece Hall, unfortunately, at this point in the season. Honorable mention, tough matchups, but at least in these first 2 cases, not going to, lead us to them dropping too far down the ranks. Travis Etienne against the Colts, and then also Derrick Henry against the Packers. Again, tough on paper spots, but guys, come on, it's Travis Etienne and Derrick Henry. We're feeling good there. Freeman, the more interesting one, though, is Rico Dowdle going up against the Seahawks. Again, minus 2.9 Xfinity boost. And Rico just hasn't been playing good football, man. Awesome story. He's still one of the better waiver wire pickups of the year and everything, but just more than 3.2 yards per carry in one of his last 6 games. Chuba Hubbard's a little bit more involved. I mean, I put Rico kind of right in Breece Hall territory as an RB3 that, yeah, if I can help it, man, I'd rather not start.
Yeah, hard to trust Rico. Totally agree with you there. And I will say Travis Etienne and Derrick Henry in the vast super majority of leagues, you're starting them. In guillotine leagues, I would say, it's a tighter circle of trust. You're looking at in-game players, and because of the matchups, I could actually see a case for benching Travis Etienne and Derrick Henry in guillotine leagues, but that's really the only circumstances in which you wouldn't have those guys in your lineup.
Best of luck to everyone who have avoided that chop there for 16 long weeks. Go get that W here in week 17. So just to summarize, guys, Breece Hall and Rico Dowdle in our Vandercream Trust Meter, we're talking like 1 out of 10 here at this point. Travis Etienne and Derrick Henry, more so like 6 out of 10. But to Freedman's point, if you are dealing with, again, legit the top 10 running backs and trying to pick between them, I understand not exactly going hard in the paint with them. But yeah, guys, again, shout out to Vandercream. They actually give guys no nonsense, fragrance-free care designed for sensitive skin, because even guys need a little bit of help when it comes to that. So thank you again to our friends over at Vandercream. Freeman, time for our what the heck flex of the week. We are trying to pick running backs ranked outside of the top 24 who we do think could give us some big games, despite obviously not exactly having the perfect profile. I'm going to start things off with a look at someone else. I'll let you go first, actually. Freeman, who is your what the heck flex of the week?
I'm looking at Kyle Monangai, the number 2 running back for the Bears going against the 49ers. The Bears have a 2-day edge over the 49ers. So the Bears played on Saturday, 49ers played on Monday. So they have an edge there. The 49ers are number 31 in defensive rush success rate. And I mean, you don't need me to say this if you've been watching football, but terribly injured on the front 7. Nick Bosa, Mikael Williams, Yetur Gross-Matos, linebacker Fred Warner, all of those guys are out. And then linebacker Tatum Bethune has been dealing with an ankle injury for, like the past month and a half. He aggravated that injury last week. So I'm skeptical that he's going to play. And then you look at Monangai and the workload he has. Since number 1 running back DeAndre Swift returned from injury in week 10, Monangai has still averaged 14 opportunities per game, and he has forced a 50-50 split of the goal line opportunities, the goal line carries with Swift. And so he's not like your full-blown workhorse, but I kind of put him in the Blake Corum category as a guy who still has a pretty significant number 2 role and who actually is really getting a lot of the goal line carries there because of the 50-50 split.
And really has been good stuff out of this Bears run game all season long, particularly ever since their bye. And going up against this banged up 49ers front 7, as Freeman mentioned, really could bring out the best. So I like that call. I'm going to be going with Giants RB Tyrone Tracy. Obviously sent my stupid helicopter I sent out on social media straight to the dirt last week, but coming back around because Lord knows America loves a comeback. Getting a matchup against the Raiders defense that, yes, maybe we do see Max Crosby completely take over, and also keep an eye on the status of Giants left tackle Andrew Thomas. He is one of those offensive linemen where we really do have to kind of downgrade everyone involved and she's out of the picture. But I'm not going to let one really rough, let's face it, somewhat predictable performance against Brian Flores and the Vikings distract from the fact that Jackson Dart and company have largely been good this season, okay? Even Tyrone Tracy, last week's dud was annoying, but, he finished as the RB 32, okay? Like, that's not ideal, but he had 3 straight games before that when he was fully healthy as a legit top 13 running back. So, honestly, got going early on in that game. I thought it was going to be a bigger performance. Wound up not being one, but that's what happens when you can't throw the football. So again, Giants, Raiders, I pray for anyone actually going out of their way to watch this game, but I do think if you happen to catch it, Tyrone Tracy could, again, give you those 15 to 20 touches and make the most out of them, as he has done for a lot of this season. So again, Raiders did do a pretty good job against Houston last week. Before that, 183, 152, and 192 rushing yards allowed. Hopefully Mr. Tracy is the next man up to do good things there. So guys, more wide receiver goodness coming up next. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Mike's Hard Lemonade is partnering with Matthew Berry and Fantasy Life to give away weekly prizes all season long, including a trip to this year's big game. Prizes include Fantasy Life Plus subscriptions, gift cards to New Era, Homage and Knock Around, TV, soundbars, and again, 2 tickets to that big game that seems to happen every February. And not only have Fantasy Life and Mike's Hard partner for the sweepstakes, but we've also collaborated on a new 12-pack of exclusive flavors, including Hard Pink Pick 6, Hard Pineapple Rush, Hard Berry Blitz, my personal favorite, Hard Apple Tackle. So guys, go to www.mikeshard.com/sweepstakes/fantasy life today and enter the sweepstakes and go find the Mike's Hard Fantasy Life 12-pack at a store near you. Note that you must be 21 plus years of age. This is a premium malt beverage, Mike's Hard Lemonade Company in Chicago, Illinois. Breaking down week 17 rankings here on the Fantasy Life Show. Moving on to wide receivers. Again, these are my personal ranks, where you can find our entire suite of ranks over on fantasylife.com from our group of alleged experts. Mr. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver one, followed by Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But keep an eye on that pesky knee injury that does make him at least a little bit questionable for Thursday's matchup against the Vikings. We got CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 5, Nico Collins, wide receiver 6, and then 7 through 12, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, AJ Brown, George Pickens, T. Higgins, and Jameson Williams. Moving on into wide receiver 2 territory, we do have Courtland Sutton continuing to be on a heater, sitting pretty as our wide receiver 13. DJ Moore, wide receiver 14, dependent on Luther Burden and Rome Odunze, again missing time. Juwan Jennings, wide receiver 15, with rookie Pearsall seemingly out of the issue. Jalen Waddle, Zay Flowers, Tedero McMillan, Terry McLaurin, Jacoby Myers, Drake London, Michael Wilson, Devontae Smith, and Rashee Rice, rounding out the top 24. Freeman, I started going pretty quick there because literally after Juwan Jennings, that's where I am drawing the circle of trust here. Not that these guys couldn't get something going, but just, man, T-Mac against the Seahawks. Terry McLaurin's a good matchup, but, we got Josh Johnson under center. I have at least one question for the rest of these guys. Maybe I have Drake London too low. We can talk about that, but where would you draw the circle of trust?
100% agree. Juwan Jennings for me is like the clear line of demarcation. You have Courtland Sutton getting 9.5 targets since the bye week. DJ Moore looked like DJ Moore last week, with no Rome Odunze and Luther Burden. Juwan Jennings, getting just great opportunities, and now potentially George Kittle is out. Ricky Pearsall could be out again. So good things for those guys, and then questions about everyone after that. Jalen Waddle catching targets from a number 3 quarterback, Zay Flowers, potential backup quarterback, Tedero McMillan, tough matchup against the Seahawks. Just absolutely agree. Juwan Jennings for me is the demarcation. He's in the circle of trust. Everyone after that is out.
Back-to-back Pro Bowler Zay Flowers. What a time to be alive. And probably a representation that, the AFC maybe doesn't have as many balling wide receivers as you might have otherwise thought. A lot of injuries have to do with that, obviously. Didn't want to go through some of those injuries right now. I mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown again. We'll see what happens with that knee issue, but just the fact that Dan Campbell did have to say like they're hopeful, it's just kind of soreness coming out of the game. Not exactly great going in that matchup against the Vikings. So Jameson Williams is already a wide receiver 1 regardless, but someone like Khalif Raymond could hopefully help you in the flex. God forbid our one-true sun god could not suit up. Also note that Rashee Rice and Tyquan Thornton not practicing for the Chiefs probably puts them on the wrong side of questionable to return from the concussion protocol. Freeman, we would give Xavier Worthy a bump up, man, but based on what we saw last week and this matchup against the Broncos of all teams, I'll move Worthy up, but it's not probably even going to be in the top 36, and I would really prefer not to start him if at all possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't want anyone to start him based on any advice that I would give them. So my ranking would be, with that in mind of okay, I'm going to bump him up, but don't you dare think about putting him in your lineup.
And look, I have Rice, wide receiver 24. If you wanted to go even lower, though, than that, I get it. I just think that just based on kind of the just points and who they have available in the Chiefs offense, he'll probably still find a way at 10 targets, and they're going to be at the lower ADOT screen variety. But again, really is a rough situation in Kansas City right now. Also with the Bears, again, mentioned it, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, foot and ankle issues respectively. DJ Moore would not be the same sort of must start if we do see either get back into action. Patriots is where it gets interesting, Freeman, because we did see Stephon Diggs again blow up last Sunday night, as he's done in primetime, but also as he's done when he's actually gotten a full-time route rate. However, it's pretty clear that did happen in part because Kayshon Boutte with a concussion and then DeMario Douglas with a hamstring issue did suffer injuries there. So if we do see Boutte and Pop Douglas out of the picture, honestly, Freeman, I think I move Diggs all the way up there into the circle of trust, wide receiver 16, right alongside Juwan Jennings.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I will say my enthusiasm is probably reserved for someone else in that wide receiver unit, and I'm going to be talking about him a little bit later.
Perhaps someone who's very large and, really does hate feet, I should say shoes and footwear in general, but more on that in a little bit. Note that Cowboys wide receiver Ryan Flournoy, again, questionable with a knee issue, would be a nice little bump for Jake Ferguson, but nothing too crazy. And then guys that we are not expecting to play include Devontae Adams next Monday night with the hamstring issue, Ricky Pearsall with the ankle and knee, just doesn't sound particularly imminent, wasn't able to practice last week. DK Metcalf is suspended, Calvin Austin dealing with a hamstring injury, more so a bump for the running backs and maybe Darnell Washington. Jefferson. Sorry guys, we're not getting too excited about Adam Thielen or Marquez Valdes-Scantling with the fantasy season on the line. Also know Pat Bryant fully expected to be out for Thursday Night Football, so slight bumps from Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin behind Courtland Sutton, and then Tyler Lockett with the Raiders. Yeah, maybe a few more targets for Brock Bowers. Freeman, let's get into the best matchups of the week now, and we are starting off with Commanders wide receivers Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel going up against the Cowboys defense as allowed a +8 Xfinity boost. So last week against the Chargers, no Quentin Williams, so maybe they can have more success at the line of scrimmage if they do get him back in action. But as we saw, even with the returning Trayvon Diggs, man, they cannot cover anyone in Dallas. So again, with Terry McLaurin, if we did have Marcus Mariota out there, I would have him in the circle of trust inside the top 16. Even with Josh Johnson, though, man, I couldn't move him down too far.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I will say I'm still a little bit optimistic about Terry McLaurin, just in the perspective of, all right, if you have him, your season maybe hasn't gone the way that you would have wanted, but maybe you're competing for the number one prize in the consolation bracket, and McLaurin is probably one of the 3 best wide receivers you have. I feel like you could probably still get away with starting him. The Cowboys are bad. They're just historically bad in their secondary. And McLaurin has a 37% share of the air yards, a 40% share of the end zone targets since he returned to action in week 13. That's good enough for him to do damage against the secondary that's missing cornerback DeRon Bland, missing depth cornerback Kalen Carson, and just has been bad all year. And I still take some solace in the idea that Josh Johnson, as bad as he was last week, that was still a situation of him coming in cold off the bench against a pretty stout Eagles defense. Now, the team can prepare, they can build a game plan around him, and he's going against the Cowboys, who allow quarterbacks and wide receivers alike to go off. So Terry McLaurin, I'm still enthusiastic about him. Relative to where I would be with a normal third string quarterback, it's all right, given that set of circumstances, this is the best case scenario.
Josh Johnson, certainly a bit long in the tooth at this point, but I'm with you. If he just had to, again, kind of rank the backup quarterbacks and their ability just to kind of sling it around and put up some passing yards, man, he would at least be in the top half of things there. So Freeman does have McLaurin as wide receiver 16. My wide receiver 19, honestly, I'm kind of leaning towards moving him up a little bit, getting closer to the Oracle over here. Also want to hype up, to an extent, Vikings wide receivers Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison going up against a Lions defense that has been atrocious, really overall, but particularly against the pass here for the better part of the season, plus 5.2 Xfinity boost to wide receivers. Of course, we got to see if JJ McCarthy or Max Brosmer is going to be under center. So let's see, where did you end up with Justin Jefferson at Freeman? Because as you guys saw, I did not get him in my top 24. I have him wide receiver 28. Freeman's got him wide receiver 18. Just every single week, Freeman, I want to tear my hair out trying to rank Justin Jefferson.
I hate myself. I mean, I hate myself anyway, but I hate myself especially because of the Justin Jefferson ranking. But we talked about this on the show on Monday, where you look at what Justin Jefferson has done over the past month. And in terms of the fantasy production, it's absolutely terrible. And then in terms of the utilization, it's one of the best kinds of utilization profiles you could look at in the league, to where it's just oh man, it's not going well, but they are still targeting him at a ridiculous rate. You look at what he's done since week 13, a 35% share of the air yards, but a 50% share of the end zone targets. That's what Justin Jefferson has seen. That is still true number one type of workload. It's just he has a third string quarterback throwing to him, or a quarterback who will be a third string in his future. Whichever way you look at it is not good.
Finally, guys, we got 49ers wide receiver Juwan Jennings again set up very well against the Bears, and accordingly, that's why he is in our circle of trust in the legit and upside wide receiver 2 option this week. Should again be in far more lineups than not. Brock Purdy and company, guys. I know that defense is rough, but they really can't score with anyone as long as they got at least a handful of their a rather abundant group of playmakers still healthy. Moving on to our worst matchups of the week. So it is going to be headlined by Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams against the Vikings. That said, I still have both ranked in the top 12 because as tough as Brian Flores and company are against young quarterbacks. Jared Goff hasn't had that many problems against them over the years, Freedman. Looking at the 5 matchups against Brian Flores' Vikings, Goff's gone for 284, 231, 280, 320, and 257 passing yards with an 8-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio along the way. So I'm not saying it's an easy spot, but I just think particularly it's kind of the perfect storm here for the Lions. They can't slow down opponents on defense, so they're kind of finding themselves, in trailing game script. They can't really run the ball, so they're forced to throw it. And then, okay, we don't have Sam Laporta, so everything's kind of condensed around Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams.
Yeah, you don't have to really think at all about Amon-Ra St. Brown, even with the tough matchup you're starting him. Jameson Williams is a little bit more on the borderline. Like if you're playing in a championship game, you probably have a number of good wide receivers. So it could be conceivable your team is good enough where you don't need to start Jameson Williams. But I agree with you that, he's right there. I have him in the circle of trust. He's closer to the borderline, but he's still in the circle of trust. And what we have seen specifically from him since Dan Campbell took over play calling duties, I believe it was in week 10. He has still been just as productive as any of the best wide receivers in the league. So yeah, Jameson Williams, it's a tough matchup, but I think if you had to start him, you could live with that decision.
It has been a wild stretch. I believe Lamar Jackson in week 10 was the last quarterback to throw a touchdown against this Vikings defense. So we need to double check that, but I'm pretty sure, guys, that is the case. If not, go ahead and throw some tomatoes at me or whatever, but really has been a nice stretch run for a Vikings defense that seemed like they were falling off around the midseason point. Also know Khalil Shakir against the Eagles. That was a minus 6.7 Xfinity boost. Also could be a bad weather game. So keep an eye on that. Again, recording this on Tuesday, but one of the things I do before setting any lineup, guys, is going to rotogrinders.com/weather/NFL and getting Kevin Ross' thoughts on the matter. Always very helpful. Again, with the precipitation and wind, all those things we got to worry about when setting our fantasy lineups. Then also know we got Chargers wide receivers Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson, and Keenan Allen going up against the Texans defense that, again, has allowed 41 points to the Cardinals and the Raiders over the last 2 weeks, but on the season still really have been a force to be reckoned with. So McConkey did find the end zone last week. Quentin Johnson got over 100 yards, but Freedman, we both have McConkey ranked as wide receiver 27. Quentin Johnson is also outside of our top 35 wide receivers. So safe to say, one very nice performance against the Cowboys hasn't completely changed what's been otherwise a pretty disappointing month or so for this Chargers passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. The Chargers could be a really intriguing team once they get into the playoffs, but they just have so much going on offense. A lot of guys who are pretty good pass catchers, but it means that it kind of dilutes everything for everybody. And then their offensive line still is kind of in shambles, so it inhibits the total just effectiveness of the offense in general. So yeah, a good team, but probably fading this week all of the pass catchers.
Time for our what the heck flex play of the week and get out to pick a wide receiver not ranked inside the top 24. You went deep in your bag here, Freedman. I respect this. I took a little bit of a chicken way out. I just picked the wide receiver 27, who we'll get to in a minute, but you decided to go with Dwayne McFarland's least favorite player of all time. Talk about Mac Hollins this week, potentially set up well with multiple teammates injured.
Yeah, since Dwayne isn't here, now is the opportunity to talk about Collins. You mentioned it was Stephon Diggs last week who really grabbed the headlines, and Diggs obviously had a great game with the 10 targets. He had 138 yards receiving, but Hollins also had a pretty nice performance, 69 yards on 9 targets. Nice. And since the week 14 bye, he's the number 1 wide receiver for the Pats in usage, a 27% target share, 37% share of the air yards, 33% share of the end zone targets. And if you take this out even to week 10, he's still the number 1 wide receiver on the team in terms of utilization. You mentioned Kayshon Boutte is uncertain. And then you look at the matchup. The Jets, number 32 in defensive pass DVOA, one of the best matchups that we could see for any wide receiver this week. And it makes sense. You look at what has happened to that Jets secondary, and it's just been absolutely decimated over the past year. Like the top 4 cornerbacks for the team last year, all of them are gone. And then you look at some of the guys who have replaced them. Jarvis Brownlee, he's on IR. Azure Thomas, he's on IR. So this is just a bad and then decimated secondary. Mac Hollins, I mean, I know he's super inconsistent, but like, I swear there is going to be a game, and like, it'll happen in the playoffs where it's like, oh, the random Mac Hollins game people will be talking about years from now. It's like, oh, you remember when Mac Hollins had like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns? Like, that is within like a massive blow up game like that is within the range of outcomes because he gets targeted downfield, he gets targeted in the end zone, and in terms of the utilization, he's the number one wide receiver on the team.
And I bet Freeman, I'm not, I don't have my DFS projection ownerships in front of me or anything like that right now, but everyone in our community is so obsessed with rookies become the next big thing that I'm guessing a lot of people are just going to want Kyle Williams to be the one actually taking the rise as opposed to Matt Collins, who again, we just know is going to be on the field more often, whether you like it or not. So love that call on Matt Collins. Again, set up great against the Jets. Stephon Diggs will be ranked higher, but yeah, Matt Collins really does enter that wide receiver 3 conversation. I'm going to be going with, though, Brian Thomas Jr. going up against the Colts defense that a few short weeks ago did look good enough against, caught 3 passes for 87 yards. And I just think we're seeing kind of this Jaguars offense really peaking at the right time. And look, we saw Jacoby Myers over the course of a month really put forward some wide receiver 1 level numbers. Parker Washington had a fantastic game against the Broncos, getting to feast against Riley Moss all afternoon. So who's next? Why not BTJ? So he has looked healthy out there, and just again, this Colts defense, guys, we saw it on Monday Night Football. Like, the 49ers had their way with them. And really, ever since they had been getting so banged up, it's been rough. So they got DeForest Buckner back for Monday Night Football, but it doesn't really matter because he can't cover these wide receivers down the field. So just 28th in EPA allowed per dropback since week 12. Not expecting Sauce Gardner back. Travarius Ward is out of the picture. Again, a very banged up defense. And with BTJ, we know sometimes it only takes one. So again, kind of in that boomer bust wide receiver 3 range, but accordingly, I do think this would be the spot for BTJ to boom. So we'll see what happens there, but let's keep our eyes on these passing attacks and get into some quarterbacks. My top 12 quarterbacks of the week, you can find them over at fantasylife.com. But in the number 1 spot, we have Drake May leading things off again in that smash spot against the New York Jets, followed by Josh Allen against the Eagles, dealing with some foot soreness, but not tentatively expecting that to really be impacting things too much. Again, that is going to be the weather game to keep an eye on. Same thing with Jalen Hurts as our QB3, followed by Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix, and Brock Purdy. Again, I did put these together on Monday morning. I will say, after just seeing how good Brock Purdy looked once again, and with the reasonable matchup on the horizon against the Bears, I am comfortable moving him up probably all the way up to QB6, particularly considering Stafford's going to likely be without Devontae Adams again. We got Jared Goff, Jacoby Brissett, and Jackson Dart rounding out the top 12. So Freeman, circles of trust, a little bit tougher, kind of at the onesie positions, but is there a big discrepancy in my top 12 versus what you have right now?
I mean, not really. I would say the guy that stands out to me is Jalen Hurts at number 3. And I get the matchup. I would just say out of the top 6, I feel the safest about all of those other guys compared to Jalen Hurts. Like, if I had to pick who's the one guy who like has a game that just absolutely kills you, that like costs you the championship, it feels like it could be Jalen Hurts because they're not really availing themselves anymore of the tush push. And he just does have these bouts where sometimes it's like, oh, there was the 4 interception game. I just don't see anything like that from Drake May, from Josh Allen. Dak Prescott, great matchup against the Commanders. Joe Burrow, fantastic matchup against the Cardinals. Matthew Stafford playing indoors against the Falcons, playing at MVP level. Jalen Hurts on the road against the Bills. It just feels like if there's one guy in that top 6 who ends up crashing, it feels like it's going to be Hurts.
Certainly been very touchdown dependent recently and through the air. As we talked about on our waiver wire show, Hurts actually has been a big faller here over the last 4 weeks because he hasn't scored a tush-push touchdown in over a month. So again, given some of this weather, we have seen the over-under in that Eagles-Bills game fall from an opening of 46.5 to 43.5. And it's at the point where the Eagles are implied to score just 20.5 points. For reference, that is the same as the Falcons, the same as the Colts, and the same as the Dolphins this week. So not exactly the usual juggernaut that we are dealing with. Moving on, guys, I want to break down some of the injuries that, again, we are keeping an eye on. Lamar Jackson with his back issue is considered day-to-day, says he hopes to play Saturday. Freedman, again, I'm changing my mind as the week goes on and stuff. We're consuming new information, all right? Why would I not change my mind when something better comes to it? But Lamar Jackson, even if he is active, man, I got him as QB21. I do not want to play it because I do not think a back injury is all of a sudden going to bring the rushing upside out of him. And while I have been defending, again, what he can do through the air, just now there's like re-aggravation risk going. There's also the case where he's facing a Packers defense in Lambeau. Who knows what that weather's going to be like? Just if you can help it, I don't think we can play Lamar Jackson. I would start Tyler Shuck over Lamar Jackson this week.
I mean, I agree. He's my QB 18, and that sort of factors in like, I kind of am skeptical he's going to play. And if he does play, I don't think he's really Lamar Jackson QB 18. I agree with you completely.
Mentioned Josh Allen with the foot day to day, but we are fully expecting him to play. We'll see what happens in Green Bay. Speaking of Jordan Love and the concussion protocol, Malik Willis dealing with a shoulder injury. Green Bay did not feel the need to sign anyone though, so we'll see what happens. Again, going to be more of a downgrade for the pass catchers if it is Malik Willis instead of Jordan Love. Not because Malik can't sling it. Again, that was a beautiful touchdown to Romeo Dobbs, and we've seen him do good things, but Green Bay really has embraced the run more than ever without Jordan Love in the picture. Certainly, a matchup against an improving Ravens defense that isn't exactly a smash spot either. Also, no Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy not practicing with a hand injury. Could be a tough turnaround on Thursday. Will be a downgrade to everyone involved if we do have Max Brosmer under center. And then, as we mentioned with the Commanders, Marcus Mariota dealing with the hand and quad injuries. It does seem like we'll have Josh Johnson under center. And then finally, yes, Jets quarterback Brady Cook once again starting. If, guys, you have any chance of getting that Patriots DST, they probably would be my number one pick of the week here in week 17. That takes us, Freeman, not to the matchups of the week. Those are important and everything, but I want to get to the big question of the week because it's Jacoby Brissett, man. Gave us week 6 through week 15, one QB1 performance after another, and then a dub when we all finally relied on him in week 16. So that sucked, but now all of a sudden he gets a Bengals defense that has not been good all season long. Are you still buying Jacoby Brissett as a QB1 with the fantasy season on the line, Freeman? Because I think I am.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Before we were recording the show, I was writing up, the week 17 Freedman's favorites. Jacoby Brissett is in there. And yeah, you mentioned it. He disappointed last week. And let's put it in perspective. A disappointment for Brissett was 203 yards and a touchdown. Like that is the type of game to where if like Jalen Hurts had that, we'd be like, all right, decent passing day for him. Like Jacoby Brissett has been borderline phenomenal this year. In his 9 other starts before last week, 2,700 yards, 18 touchdowns passing, and 142 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Going against now a secondary in the Bengals who are without cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt, potentially could be without cornerback DJ Turner. And then even when those guys have been healthy, just still one of the worst pass defenses in the league. So yes, Jacoby Brissett, I believe in him for one more week.
And guys, again, it was a bad performance last week and everything. That said, really could have realistically had an extra 5 points there. Trey McBride did have an official charge drop on what would have otherwise been a 16-yard touchdown. So had Jesse Bates coming over the top. Wasn't, a wide open drop off the chest plate or anything like that. But again, a catch that McBride usually makes and now set up better than ever against the Bengals himself. So Jacoby Brissett, my QB 11. And again, not starting him over Brock Purdy or anything, but do think he should be in a lot of lineups relative to some of the more banged up guys we see in that QB2 tier. Takes us to Freeman. Not a what the heck flex because we're talking about quarterbacks here, but a worth saying there's a chance player, someone ranked outside of our top 12 who we do think still has an opportunity to potentially boom in a single week's worth of action. And I don't hate it, Freeman, because if there's one thing we've learned this year is that the Cowboys cannot stop opposing quarterbacks. So why not go off Josh Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying this as the guy wearing the Cowboys hat. I mean, this defense just absolutely sucks. And, I talked a little bit about Josh Johnson earlier when I was thinking about Terry McLaurin, but yeah, I mean, he was bad last week. There's no getting around that. He had a negative 0.22 adjusted yards per attempt. That is the kind of thing that like JJ McCarthy would look at and say like, oh man, that's terrible. But again, he was coming in as an in-game replacement, cold off of the bench, going against the Eagles. This week, the team for the Commanders, actually, they have time to build the game plan around him. They have an extra day in comparison to the Cowboys because they played a day early. And then they're going against a Cowboys team that has allowed almost every quarterback they face to go off. They could be without 3 starters in the back 7 in linebacker DeMarvion Overshone, cornerback Deron Bland, and strong safety Donovan Wilson. And then Johnson, I will say, has been a good runner throughout his career as well, 5.1 yards per carry. Now, some of that was when he was a much younger man, but I still think he has a little bit of that running capability. And as Ian mentioned earlier, he has shown the willingness throughout his time to sling it, like just to let it rip. And if there's one defense where a backup can come in and just kind of like play hero ball, it feels like it could be the Cowboys that would let a backup, let me say a third stringer out of nowhere come and put up points against them.
And guys, look, Josh Johnson is 39 years of age at this point, not a young man anymore, but the last 2 extended appearances we've seen from him, not including last week, again, thrown out there, only had 9 pass attempts, but you go back to 2021, he had a game with the Jets, he threw for 317 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then he switched to the Ravens midseason and threw for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. So again, it might not all be pretty, you'll probably have a couple interceptions in there, but this is the sort of backup quarterback who's a veteran, willing to actually throw downfield. He's not just going to go down with the ship like we do see a certain segment of backups doing. So I do like that call, Mr. Freedman. I'm going to be going, though, with Buccaneers quarterback Baker Mayfield, guys, against the Dolphins. And I know it's been rough here. I mean, it seems like freaking years ago that we actually had Baker Mayfield as unironically one of the top MVP candidates, but he's going up against a Dolphins defense that is not quitting on the season. I thought that could be the case throughout the year, but kudos to Mike McDaniel. The boys are still playing hard, but just had 0 answers for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and company last week. And there were just some wide open touchdowns going to Chase Brown there as well. So I think it's a Dolphins defense that, again, regardless of how hard they're playing, they're pretty bad at football at this point. And this Buccaneers offense, man, is still stockpiled with talent if only Baker can, again, get the ball to his playmakers. So again, last 2 games against the Dolphins, we saw Aaron Rodgers go for 224 and 2 touchdowns on 23 of 27 passing. And then Burrow goes for 309 and 4 touchdowns on 25 of 32. The football is barely hitting the ground against these guys. And just with a fully loaded offense, man, I do think Baker can hopefully get going here again. So again, didn't quite crack my top 12. I have Baker Mayfield as my QB 16, but Freeman, he's not even eligible for you because you do have Baker as your QB 11. So sounds like we're on the same page here.
Yeah, the matchup certainly helps, and having Mike Evans back certainly helps. And yeah, I agree. Mayfield hasn't played his best this year, not even close to it, but the circumstances conspire, have him at, QB 11.
So I will say, guys, Tyler Shuck is Freeman's QB 12, my QB 15. That was the highlight in our waiver wire show as the QB streamer of the week. If you are dealing with a Lamar Jackson or a Jordan Love or one of these other injuries, Tyler Shuck really would be your guy against the Titans defense that, again, not really good overall, but where they are good is right in the middle with Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat. Really have persuaded more opponents not to throw the football as opposed to running. Certainly what we're looking for when trying to pick a fantasy quarterback. So good stuff there. Let's close things out with a look at tight ends. We got me, an alleged fantasy expert, and my top 12 tight ends on the board right now. Mr. Trey McBride coming off his worst performance of the season when we needed him most, but ready to absolutely go gangbuster here in your third place matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. We got tight end 2, Brock Bowers, tight end 3, George Kittle, pending an ankle injury, unfortunately happened on Monday night. Don't know the full, ramifications of that issue. I will say friend of the show, Dr. Jeff Mueller, did say just based on what he was able to see, based on Kittle seemingly wanting to go back in towards the end of the game, he is optimistic he could play week 17. So again, we'll see what happens throughout the week. Fingers crossed Kittle is ready to go by Sunday night. Harold Fanning, tight end 4, Kyle Pitts, tight end 5, and then we're getting wonky, people. Jawan Johnson, tight end 6, that is consensus for Freeman and I. Taysom Hill, tight end 7, who we'll talk more about in a bit. Colson Loveland, Bretton Strange, Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, and Dallas Goedert as our tight end 12. So again, Freeman, we both have the same top 6 here. I will say, as much as I love what Jawan Johnson has done this year, and I do think he's a quality play. That's why we have him ranked as tight end 6. I can't exactly include him in the circle of trust. I do think that's pretty clearly the top 5 here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I will say, there seems to be like the innermost sanctum of the center of trust, and that is Trey McBride. And George Kittle would be right there if not for the injury. We kind of have to see about that. But Brock Bowers, Fannin, and Pitts, those are the guys that are in consideration. And then after that, everyone else is outside of the circle of trust. But hopefully, you're in a situation where you're starting Trey McBride in your championship matchup this week. And if not, then I think you have a decision to make between Bowers, Fannin, and Pitts.
If we do see Kittle as a game time decision, it's Sunday night. It is unique enough, though, Freedman, where, look, you're not going to have a chance to have, I would think not, Colson Loveland, who's also in that game, or Kyle Pitts on Monday night. But Colby Parkinson is someone that pissed off a lot of fantasy managers, and for good reason. That was a dud. But let's face it, guys, he's still been a tight end one more weeks than not over the course of the last 6 weeks. There's also not going to be, again, Devontae Adams out there. And it would just be the most fantasy football thing ever if Colson Loveland and Colby Parkinson, boom, the week after everyone expected. So if we do see a situation, Freedman, where like it's George Kittle as a legit game time decision, I think I would be okay waiting out for a Colby Parkinson. So it depends on who's out there, but like there are more options, I should say, and also including Terrence Ferguson, more options available on Monday night than we're used to seeing when you have these annoying game time decisions to deal with.
That is fair. And I will say also, as a worst case scenario, Jake Tongas isn't terrible. Like we've actually seen him be productive. So, if it's a situation where the teams that got knocked out of the playoffs earlier, those are the teams that had Bowers, Pitts, Goddard, whoever, Loveland, Parkinson, maybe you can still pick up. I mean, Tongas is absolutely available on waivers, and maybe he really is the option, but hopefully you're not in the situation of having to wait out George Kittle.
That actually is a great call. Earlier on the season, we saw Tonjas working as a tight end one during Kittle's absence. So it might just be as easy as actually slotting him in there like that call. Other injuries to keep an eye on. Again, we have Browns tight end David Njoku out with a knee injury. That said, Freedman, I don't think I changed my Harold Fannin ranking even if Njoku comes back. There is in such a dire state in this passing game. We already saw Fannin getting a full-time role even when Njoku was still in the lineup. Would you be even downgrading Fannin in the ranks that much if Njoku is back?
Maybe slightly, but the one thing that really is interesting with Fannin is that he's gotten like goal line opportunities as a runner, and now with Quinshon Judkins out, maybe he gets all the more opportunities as a runner at the goal line. So maybe there's like a little bit of like who's the real Taysom Hill? Maybe it's Harold Fannin. But yeah, David Njoku at this point, I'm skeptical he plays, and even if he does, it looks like the role that Harold Fannin has is pretty secure.
I do wonder too, man. Last week he scored on a fullback dive, but they actually have used a couple wildcat snaps for Fannin this year, but they kind of got away with that and started going with Judkins. So I don't know, Freedman. Rocket Sanders got stuffed twice on the goal line. Like if we do see Fannin actually being used as that wildcat package that the Browns seem to like more than anyone inside the 5, getting me excited there. So we'll see what happens with Fannin. But again, consensus top 5 option regardless. I note that. All right, so this one's actually kind of interesting. I stumbled upon this very late on Monday evening, but I'm happy I did. Packers tight end John Fitzpatrick with an Achilles injury. He's done for the season. Josh Wiley with a concussion did not play last week, did not practice all of last week. That led Freedman to Luke Musgrave having an 84% route rate. That was his highest of the season. First time he's basically been over like the 50% mark. So if it's Malik Willis, no, we can't get excited about it. It's probably more of like a DFS Saturday sort of play anyway, but we are looking at a situation where Luke Musgrave could in fact have a full-time role, which just hasn't been the case this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned this because this was in my notes as well for Freeman's favorites. And I opted not to include Musgrave in the article, but because it's like we just don't know about the quarterback situation. But I do feel as if there's something actionable here, whether it's DFS, whether it's creating some sort of like SGPs where we have Luke Musgrave in it, whether it's just betting Luke Musgrave anytime touchdown, whatever it is. Like there is some market that is not valuing Luke Musgrave as a guy who's running an 84% route rate.
My new favorite thing, Freedman, because I just, I've been a losing gambler for a long time. And this year I was just like, all right, I'm tired of losing $10 on these games that I know probably aren't going to go right. So I just bet $1 on stuff now. But if you combine 3 or 4 first touchdowns into a $1 parlay, first of all, it'll never in a million years hit. But if it does, it's like a legit, $5K payout, which again, is all I'm kind of looking to get a sweat with anyway. So I'm calling it Luke Musgrave first touchdown Saturday night. Well, even if we hit that, I'm sure the others won't hit, but you could imagine what it'd be like if they did. Finally, Vikings tight end TJ Hawkinson not practicing with a shoulder, not that you really care. Tyler Higbee will not be activated. So again, that is still good news for Colby Parkinson if you're brave enough to go down that well. And Terrence Ferguson should continue to have a full-time role as well. And then Raiders tight end Foster Moreau will not play with that ankle injury as well. So keep that in mind. Foster Moreau, am I crazy, Freedman? He's on the Saints now, right?
Yeah, Foster Moreau.
Yeah, he's on the Saints. I don't know why. Okay. That's what I get for doing the show sheet at 1:30 a.m. Okay, yeah. So Foster Moreau won't play. That's good for Taysom Hill.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of why Taysom Hill was so good last week wasn't just because of the running workload, but he also had, I think, a season high 6 targets. And some of that was because Foster Moreau was out. And so Taysom Hill, in an offense that's dropping back a lot, I think has like the most plays per game in regulation since week 12, when we saw Tyler Shuck really start to take off. Taysom Hill was functioning as sort of like the true number 2 tight end within that offense. And so he was getting more work on the ground, but also more work in the air. So yeah, Foster Moreau being out, low key, sneaky good for Taysom Hill.
And when you do look at it last week, season high 16 backfield snaps for Taysom Hill. He also had 3 snaps as a quarterback through the late game touchdown to Chris Olave. Also had 13 snaps in the slot or out wide. So this is perfect storm, guys. We also have Devon Vele on IR, and that's what led to, again, such a great game from Taysom Hill. 15.3 PPR points last week. That was good for tight end 7 status. And I get it. He's not going to throw a 38-yard touchdown to Chris Olave every single week. But we also did see an 18-yard touchdown that was kind of a designed flag route, play action with Taysom lined up as a tight end, actually get nullified on a holding penalty. So, one ref not seeing an infraction away from 20 plus fantasy points for Taysom Hill. And that is why right now I at least have him as a tight end 7. So again, Freedman, it is not a very confident tight end 7. If you want to go ahead and kind of flip, the tight end 7, the tight end 12, I think it's kind of in that same sort of tier. Where do you fall on Taysom Hill's involvement being from all the injuries, which I do think are fair? Again, no Foster Moreau, no Devon Vele. We have our top 3 running backs out of the picture. All that makes sense for Taysom Hill being on the field more, but there also did seem to be an urgency to really get him going in his last game in the Superdome. So where are you kind of feeling his usage is on those 2 ends of the spectrum?
It's a good call out on the potential last game in the Superdome. I really wasn't taking that much into account. I think a lot of it can be chalked up to just a total dearth of options on the offense everywhere else. You mentioned it, down your top 3 running backs, the guys who were on your team to start the season. Thinking about Rashid Shaheed gone, Brandon Cooks gone, Devon Vele gone, and now Foster Moreau gone. The ball has to go somewhere. And, fortunately for Taysom Hill, he is theoretically just good enough at everything to be able to get the ball in all of these different scenarios.
I realize, guys, Taysom Hill, we could look up and he has 2 targets, 1 catch for 5 yards. 8 carries for 9 yards, right? He has not been good this year. It was fun to see him again do a few good things last week, but that really was the exception to the rule. So Freedman and I have the same tight ends between tight end 7 and tight end 12. We just have them in a different order. Taysom Hill, Colson Loveland, Bretton Strange, Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert. Do you think it's a situation, Freedman, where if you're looking at your score projection and you're like, favored to lose, let's say 35% versus 65%. Is that the situation where we bind to Taysom Hill's ceiling? Because I admit the floor is low, but I think Taysom Hill's best game beats those guys' best games.
Yes, absolutely. I would say the one guy is maybe Jake Ferguson, in that he's going against the Commanders defense that is one of the worst against tight ends. And so maybe I just kind of hope, hey, Ferguson gets a touchdown, maybe 2, potentially no Ryan Flournoy in this game. So maybe a couple extra targets go to Jake Ferguson. So I think it would come down to Ferguson versus Taysom Hill, but it's like, oh, Taysom Hill got 2 goal line touchdowns and ended up catching like 40 yards and then had like a 25-yard touchdown pass. Like, we can imagine it because we've seen something like that before. Like, that's a normal Taysom Hill, where the hell did that come from type of game. Like, that happens like twice a year. So yeah, Taysom Hill, I agree with the assessment of like, oh, I'm a dog in this matchup, and Taysom Hill, take the wheel and steer. Yeah, I can imagine that scenario.
Again, I mean, he got a tush push last week in a short yardage situation. The week before, they ran one of those fake tush pushes to Taysom Hill. So, like, he really is the heartbeat of their short yardage game for whatever that worth is, in a Saints offense that, to be fair, has been doing a good job scoring points recently. But that is going to take us to our "we're saying there is a chance" segment. Again, picking a tight end not ranked in our top 12 that we are saying there's a chance could produce bigger numbers. And Freedman, you are looking at more of an injury-induced situation. But yeah, talk about someone who was at tight end 1 for a good portion of the first 6 or 7 weeks, and Jake Tunges when George Kittle was sidelined.
Yeah, I mentioned him earlier, and in fact, I just mentioned him because I had forgotten that he was the guy I was going to talk about later. But yeah, so Kittle with the Monday Night Football injury, I think he's more on the doubtful side of questionable with the short week, and so that puts Tonjes in play as a streamer. Number 2 wide receiver Ricky Pearsall is dealing with the knee and the ankle injury. I think he's unlikely to suit up, so it means Tonjes has a shot to be the top tight end. And when he had that role for the 49ers in weeks 1 through 6, he had 3 touchdowns receiving 224 yards on 34 targets and a 70% route rate. Tonjes, for me, feels like a guy who is like streamable if we get the confirmation Kittle is out.
And again, I think the really big just takeaway here is that he's an acceptable guy to fill in for George Kittle. Like, we've seen him have that every time role. It's not a situation like we see in some parts of the league. Like, honestly, with the Packers, when all these guys were healthy, Tucker Kraft went down. The answer to who to pick up next was nobody, because they're going to rotate. We can't feel a little bit better about Tonjes again, having more so of a full-time role in the potential absence of Kittle. For we're saying the chance, I'm going back to the well with, I think, my hardest seater from last week, guys. Give me Bengals tight end Mike Gesicki, who might as well be Bengals big slot Mike Gesicki at this point. He has put his hand in the dirt as a traditional inline tight end for 2 total snaps over his last 3 games, and they are effectively using him as a full-time slot, even with T. Higgins back in the picture last week. So this hasn't exactly led to just a ton of targets, okay? He's only had 6 total over the past 2 weeks. Again, Joe Burrow will be throwing the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins first and foremost, and probably even Chase Brown more than Gesicki as well. But again, a talented pass catcher in an offense implied to score more points than any other this week. So Freeman mentioned all those injuries going on with Arizona. It might only take 3 or 4 targets for Gesicki to find the end zone, just like he did last week. So he's my tight end 15 in this one, and someone where, again, if you are in this unfortunate situation, you got some injuries popping up later in the week, or you just need some upside in the flex spot, I do think when you look at Gesicki more so as Joe Burrow's number 3 or number 4 pass game option, that's better than, again, just maybe viewing him as a tight end that hasn't got a lot going on this year. But Freeman, that's going to wrap it up. Our last week 17 show, or of course our last week 17 show, our last show together of this regular season. Plenty more goodness to come up, though, in the off season. So we invite you guys to check that out along the way. And otherwise, just have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So for Freeman, for producer Kelsey, for producer Mick, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.